Well, hey, Gundam Maniacs, welcome to another episode of Gundam Explained. In this episode, I want to discuss why I think Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam is probably the best sequel to something that exists, being that it is a sequel to the original Mobile Suit Gundam. But as a sequel, it does so many things that I think is amazing that a lot of sequels don't do. So sequels could be, from a show or a movie or, just a story in general, whatever the medium is. But a lot of times, a sequel can either be just a little bit more of what the first story gave you. It might even be a look in at itself. Like, what more can we tell of the story, and then maybe play on that in the story of the sequel. So some of my favorite sequels are things like The Empire Strikes Back. And again, I'm not talking about in terms of these are just awesome movies, but in terms of as a sequel, what is it doing that is maybe doing more to the original story? Or how is it, in a way also, that you really need to be in on the original story to really grasp the sequel? So as I mentioned, Empire Strikes Back. There's a lot to that I think is amazing, not just being a good movie in general, but as a sequel, and I'll get into that. Same with Aliens, the sequel to Alien, and they added an S and called it Aliens, and they had more aliens. A little hint to what I'll get at there. And then Blade Runner 2049. Love the original Blade Runner, and 2049 kind of went beyond what I was expecting them to do, and we'll get into that. And then you can't forget Gremlins 2. I don't know if I'll talk too much about Gremlins 2, but it's just another angle you can take when making a follow-up sequel or story. Okay, so I'm going to dive into these different sequels, but kind of pay attention to some of the themes, because I'm going to wrap that around back to Zeta Gundam. In Empire Strikes Back, we start as a sequel from, A New Hope, the original Star Wars, where the rebels are on the run. The good guys are on the run. They're even planning to split up. The main team, the people we got to fall in love with in the first one, they're going to be splitting up. They're being chased. The whole movie is them being chased, splitting up. Luke goes off for training. He doesn't even finish his training. He just wants to save his friends. And by the end of it, he doesn't even really save his friends. So he doesn't complete his training. Han Solo gets captured, and then they just stare off into the distance as the movie ends. Very interesting, right? Because we're with the same characters, but instead of a heroic journey, it's almost like things are just not working out for them. The way, what is kind of opposite of that idea of the hero's journey. These certain trials and tribulations a person goes through to put them on the path of a hero. We kind of saw that in the original Star Wars. So for Empire Strikes Back, they had to make a different approach to make it interesting. Another one being Aliens. So it's really a sequel to Alien. The idea is the first one had one alien. It was a horror movie. So what do you do for a sequel? Well, do you just make it another slasher style flick? No, what they did was, okay, let's call it Aliens. Let's have a whole bunch. And instead of one woman versus one alien, it's a group of Marines that actually have weapons and things they can use, a skill set against a large group of aliens. Yet they still fail. And when we meet Ripley, our hero, at the beginning, she had woken up in the future, and I think it was her daughter had already grown and lived her life. So we're already starting the movie where, as the hero that we got to learn from the first one, hasn't really triumphed over what happened from the first one other than staying alive. And really, the movie starts with her being found and then helping the government, corporation, whoever get the aliens. And it really ends not too long after they nuke the place. So Ripley's story was just based on what was happening with the aliens, just like an alien. Okay, getting into another one, Blade Runner 2049. What was very interesting about Blade Runner was just the idea of an android, a synthetic, and are you really live? What does it mean to be human? Do you have a consciousness? And there's very interesting themes to explore where even to this day, there's the alternate endings and alternate interpretations. But when we get to 2049, it's interesting how the idea was like, well, this android happened to be pregnant and deliver a baby. And it's like, okay, so even if we didn't answer the question from the first movie, which was cool, like, what does it mean to be an android or a human, and what's the difference and consciousness and all that, we get to, well, it procreated like a human, so does it really matter if we're questioning whether it's a human or not? Not only that, Ryan Gosling's character in it had an awesome story, because as the story's progressing and we're finding out about this possible baby born from a human and an android, you're thinking it's the main character. Ryan Gosling thinks it's him. Oh, I'm the one. They set you up for then failure to find out, no, you don't matter. Ryan Gosling is just another synthetic out there, another android. he wasn't that one that he thought, or even the viewers of the story thought. And it's very interesting they went about that. You're in a familiar world, but those familiar tropes you're expecting don't happen, and questions don't even have to be answered because new questions come up. And then that brings me to Gremlins 2, which, great movie. What I love is the first one's just kind of a goofy comedy horror in a way, where it's just a whole bunch of gremlins running around causing havoc. What do you do with a sequel? You could really do the same thing, and really on a basic level, maybe same thing, different setting, which is what they started with the sequel, having the gremlins be in this big corporate building. But what's neat about this corporate building is how they went about different floors, different levels, have different things. It's like a video game where there's different mechanics and systems that can combine. They're like, let's get the Gremlins system and combine that with like a science lab and a cooking show and like production and engineering. So you get all these wacky and crazy ideas that work, because the idea is, let's take what you're familiar with and put it in a new setting. And, on top of that, by being a comedy, it's also able to be funny, not only in telling jokes, but also kind of being aware of itself and what it's doing. Okay, so again, those are some sequels. I would agree, other than 2049, I think unanimously people love these sequels I brought up. 2049 I can kind of get, because even the original Blade Runner does have a slow pace to it that's not for everybody, even though I think the story's great. Yeah, I sometimes get bored in Blade Runner, but I enjoy watching it. So also Zeta, I think, is loved by a lot of people. I know I think it's one of my favorite Gundam stories. It really is. And it's awesome that it is a sequel to the original Mobile Suit Gundam. So with Zeta, it's very interesting what they did, because it starts where things seem familiar, but they're not, because we're kind of seeing some, we're not seeing the typical Zeon or Federation, but kind of byproducts of that. We're seeing a group called the Titans, and we're seeing the AUG, and it's like, okay, what's going on here? We're in the same world, but things have changed, maybe? And not only that, we're being introduced to new characters, Camille, where people are like, okay, what's this kid doing? Where's Amuro? But I guess that can bring in new people. It's like you don't have to have the background information to get into the character like Camille. On the other hand, Quattro. Again, for someone seeing a sequel to the original Mobile Suit Gundam, we see this character that looks awfully a lot like Char, the main bad guy of the original, yet we're following him around like he's the good guy. Again, the world is being flipped upside down. We're seeing things we're familiar with, but it's changed just enough to be interesting. And as the Zeta story goes, like typical Gundam, we see deaths that happen. That's kind of a dark aspect of Gundam in the first place. But moving forward, we get to see a little more of like what these factions are about in the world. We have the Earth Federation, but then we have like the Titans and AUG. So it's like there's infighting among the Earth sphere. But then we see the Zeon is still around. And so that brings up another interesting point for the viewer as a sequel to original Mobile Suit Gundam. Okay, we got these three sides here, three different ideologies. What's the play here? And it's very interesting to see. As much as it seems like the Titans and Zeon are kind of the same thing with the same goal in a way, the difference is the Titans feel the need to just squash and destroy the AUG. The AUG is exactly what they were originally intended for, but only creating their enemy on their own. And then with the Zeon in the mix, it's interesting to see, okay, you would think they would want to side with the AUG because that's against kind of the Titans, but really the AUG is against specifically the Titans, not the whole Earth Federation. So it could be that the Zeon would work with the Titans. But really that intrigue is what makes this sequel interesting, because the background story of the original Mobile Suit Gundam is Earth vs. Zeon. That got played out. So it's really nice to get in a sequel that it's a little deeper than that, because we're thinking, where's Quattro gonna go? Where's Char gonna go? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? What side would he join? Which side is the good side? And then even by the end of the story, Camille, the main character that is first introduced to us in Zeta, not part of the original story, but in Zeta, is then at the end taken out. Now, he's not killed, but he's like taken out unconsciously due to the immense pressure activity that him as a new type had to endure when he faced off against Paptimus Sirocco. So we're even ending a sequel to where the character is incapacitated. It's kind of similar to the end of Empire Strikes Back, where we see one of the main characters gone, captured. These are very interesting themes that sometimes on their own don't work unless there's background information, and that background information can come from the stories told previously. I think Aliens works the way it does because of Alien, even though Aliens by itself is completely badass. It's just that the background story of Alien really makes certain reveals, certain stresses that certain characters are under, like Ripley, it makes that feel more real. And with Blade Runner, with that question that's not even answered, it's further not even answered in the sequel, and then they throw that on its head by having you even look beyond the question of, you know, can an android be a human when they're given birth anyway? And then the main character isn't even important in this whole thing. Anyway, I thought that was a really cool discussion about what makes Zeta Gundam a great sequel, and not because of mobile suits or the combat, because of this narrative, the story it's telling based on what came before. So with Zeta being what I think is like one of the best sequels of all time, not just in Gundam, but among, I mean, I'm very interested. Put in the comments below, what are some other sequels that exist out there that you think are very strong, that are contenders? And not just because, oh, look, it's cool, it's more of the same, but because it takes the original story and drives it forward, but puts it on its head. It's those expectations, right? Anyway, let me know below. I'm very interested on the subject, and I do think, too, it seems like you do need to see the original Mobile Suit Gundam if you truly want to enjoy the best Gundam experience and see one of the best sequels ever. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think below, and check the links in the description for ways you can support the channel if you're interested in that. We also have a Discord. A lot of cool people are there, talk lore, other crazy random stuff. But until next time, we'll talk later.